So we got all these ships, right? And I can shoot and nobody gets hit until I specifically click on one. But if I click on them all, then it's game time. There we go, come on. Everybody wants a piece of me. There we go, come get it. I'm just getting obliterated here, but it's fine. So I'm on a quest to anger every ship in the galaxy. There we go. What's up, everybody? Axe Wizard here. Just got off work and I still got a little bit of brain juice left, so I think I'm going to try to tackle factions with my game here. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this over the past few days, and I think I'm starting to get to the point now where I keep thinking myself in circles, and I just keep mentally wrestling with it, and I think I'm just going to implement something, and then we can do what we did with the weapon system, where we might iterate and change it like 4 or 5 times. But I don't want to be like an option paralysis mode forever. So let's start mapping out what we need to do for our faction system. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a little miscellaneous notes section here. So I'm typing here as opposed to my design document because I don't really want to look at a bright white Google page right now. So I'll just type it here. So let me get my thoughts down on what the requirements are, and then we'll try to design the system, and then we'll work on implementing it. So let's see, faction requirements. So a faction needs to be, needs to have a name or a description. You have to be able to define, like, what the faction is. So, like, I don't. If you have like an empire that's like evil, or like a federation or whatever, you need to be able to have like, oh, this is the Empire faction, this is the Federation faction, this is the Random Aliens 5 faction. You need to be able to specify what those are. Factions will be able to interact with one another, so the way I kind of think I want to have it is sort of like maybe like old Age of Empires, like Age of Empires 2, like basically how they did it, where you can have your diplomacy screen. You can be, enemy, neutral, or allied. I think those are the 3 faction states. So factions will have 3, I'll say, relationship states. So we'll do enemy, neutral, allied. So they also have to keep track of like what factions are where. So this is going to be like a many-to-many relationship, basically. Because say if I have 20 factions, each faction is going to have to keep track of its standing with one another. Or maybe I could do like, I'm trying to think of how I want to handle that. So let me just get the requirements of what they need first. So they're going to have 3 states. Need to be able to determine relationship state with other factions. So if factions are at war, we need to be able to determine that. Yeah, I think that's the big thing with factions, is just being able to track that. Now, we also, a part of factions as well, not necessarily part of the faction system, but part of the other thing that's blocking my stuff is I also want to do enemy hostile tracking. So, for example, you can just have somebody who's not part of any faction just attack you, and you need to be able to track that enemy. So, hostile, enemy tracking, requirements. Keep a list of hostile ships in the system. Add or remove ships from that list as they engage or are destroyed. So these are going to kind of go hand in hand with one another. So for the factions, for example, like how I'm envisioning it is like when my ship enters a system, if I'm at war with any faction and say some ships are a member of that faction that I'm at war with, they will like instantly just lock onto me when I get in range and be added to my hostile tracking system for my ship. So they're two separate sort of things. So I'm wondering if maybe I should work on my hostile enemy tracking stuff first and then figure out the faction stuff after. Tell you what, let's just tackle factions. Let's just stick with what we're going to be doing here. So let's go to my... I'm starting to get an option paralysis again here. Let's just go to SCR types and let's start defining some types here. Then maybe the creative juices will flow and I'll just be able to pick it up from here. So types we need to define are the faction relations. So we probably want to be able to define factions as hard types and also faction states, like faction relationship states. So I'll just say faction diplomacy will be the way. So faction types, I will say macro faction. And since I don't know what any of my factions are going to be yet, like I have a rough idea of what I'm going to do for the story, but I'm still fleshing a lot of that stuff out. So, and we're not really close to being able to start implementing that story. There's a lot of stuff we have to do first. We have to do this faction system. We have to finish the AI. We have to do planets. We have to do, different systems. And then we have to do, first of all, UI. We have to get that going. We have to implement dialogue system. And then once we get all that stuff working, then we can start sort of piecing in that story. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do faction test. Okay, or actually, you know what? Faction none, because you can belong to no faction. So we'll just do faction none, and then to keep it unique, I'll just do faction none. And again, the reason why I'm defining these types instead of just using these strings later on is so that autocomplete lets me know that these are correct and they'll never be wrong. So, because I could type something wrong and then next thing you know I have a bug in my code that could be hard to find. So yeah, we got, and then I'll do faction test for right now as well, just in case we need to do that. I can always remove this later, to do remove when no longer needed. Just add that there, and then we'll do faction diplomacy type state types. So we'll do macro faction. I'm not happy calling it diplomacy state. I think just relationship faction. Yeah, we'll just do faction relationship, and then we'll do enemy, and we'll do faction relationship enemy. So yeah, and then we'll just do, you know what, we'll just copy and paste this 3 times. Boom, boom. Okay, and then we'll just change this to neutral. Neutral. And then we'll do allied. Okay, there we go. So we've got some types defined for that. So we got types for our factions and then types for the relationship state. So now that those are defined, I think I'm going to store those in my faction code here. So we'll be tracking factions. So because object controller is going to be persistent, it's like ever present. So if I go from system to system or like room to room and I have to clear out a bunch of the objects and stuff like that, the controller is going to be the one tracking all that stuff. It's also the one that's keeping track of our global particle stuff. So I probably might have some scripts to handle faction stuff. In fact, I'm sure I probably will. I'll probably have something like SCR faction control. In fact, we'll probably make that shortly. But so the factions is, I think, let's do that now. Let's close this. I'm going to create a script. Create script and SCR faction control. Okay. So what do we need to do for our factions? First of all, this is also something that, like, when we get farther along in the game and we start implementing a save system, we're going to need to like load that data from a save file. And so yeah, so I guess we should have a function to like initialize factions for like a fresh game or whatever. So first of all, let's have a function that returns just a fresh faction. Or should we? Let's define what our faction like data, what the sort of data type of it is. So I'm thinking a faction could be represented by a struct, and in that struct we can just have like the description, and then we could have, so for example, like faction could equal just like a struct, and we could have description, and we could say so our description could just be evil dudes. And then, you know, we can say, I'm thinking that we could have allies, and this could be an array. So we could have something like, you know, faction test, so on and so forth. So you could have multiple factions in there. And then you could have, you don't really care about neutral, so I don't think we have to track that. But we do want to track allies and enemies. So we can say enemies. And we could do, so no enemies currently, right? So you get the idea of like what is supposed to be done there. So I think that data type should work. I think that represents a faction. We are tracking the description of like what they are. We're also tracking the allies, you know, what other factions they are allied with. So maybe we might change this to allied factions, and we could change this to enemy factions. That way we're more explicit. So, and then to track like all of our factions, we can just have an array of these factions. So that way I can add however many factions I want. So with this data type here, I'm sort of thinking what's called CRUD logic, which is create, read, update, delete. So we can create a new faction, we can read the data from a current faction, we can update data for a faction. So for example, like if we go to war with another faction, we can update that, hey, we're going to add this faction to enemy factions. And then delete. So if a faction just gets obliterated, I don't know if we want to necessarily delete them, but we have the ability to do that. So, okay, so this is our basic data type that we're going to be working with here. So let's make a function. So I'm going to do the JS doc stuff. So I'm going to do, there it is. Function. I'm going to prefix it with SCR to show that it's a custom function. And I'm going to say init factions. Okay. And for the description, we're going to have, this will return a an array of faction structs at the default starting state. So, for example, like when a player starts a new game, you know, some factions might already be at war, some factions might already be allied. So we can set that here. Where did my cursor go? Thank you. So this is going to return, and it should return a array. I wonder if it allows us to specify like an array of struct in this shape. That would be really cool. So JS doc script comments. Yeah, I don't think GameMaker allows me to like specify, because normally I would be able to do, you know, like array, and then I would be able to specify array of struct, and then I can specify like, you know, I could specify more returns. Yeah, this is a lot. I don't think we're going to do this. We'll just do array of factions, okay? So then we're going to do function scr init factions. And we are just going to return an array of factions. So the faction that we're going to be, which is just an array of structs. So this is sort of just like JSON, if you've ever worked with that before. That's how it's going to kind of look. So we are just going to have pretty much this. So let's return let's have some fun. Dastardly dudes, and then we can have benevolent bros. It's a game. Have fun. Why not? So we could say that enemy factions, yeah. I guess we also need to have like what I'm going to say ID. And let's go back to my SCR types. And I'm just going to have, faction dudes and faction bros. And we'll just make it work. So, boom. Expand this so I could see. Faction dudes and factions bros, okay? Dudes and bros. Faction bros. I'm just going to say, I'm going to specify test in these IDs here. So that way we can, you know, make sure that we remove them when we get more serious with our game. So the ID is going to be basically, you know, faction dudes, right? So we want to be able to track that. So let's say I guess ID is not a good, maybe FID for faction ID. Faction ID is going to be faction will be dudes. Okay, and then enemy factions, we're gonna specify here that we have faction bros. Faction bros are like the enemies of like faction dudes, right? And then also that's like reciprocal. Okay, so the FID for faction bros here, and then the enemy factions is gonna be faction dudes. Righteous. So now that we have this, We also want to have a function to be able to like add and remove. So for example, like declare war or make peace or form alliance. So I want to be able to have those, and those will just modify the factions how they should be. So what I'm going to do here is in my object controller, I'm going to say global.factions, and is going to equal scr init factions. And so that will populate global factions to equal this array of faction structs that will have all that. And then so what we can do is that we can have a function. We will do function scr faction. I'm going to say form alliance. And then we're going to specify, let's say faction 1, faction 2. So then because we have two arguments or parameters, we're going to specify @param, and we're going to say faction 1. And this is going to be a string because it's going to be the ID of like faction, the faction types. So faction, and we're going to say the ID type, the ID of the, we'll say FID of the first faction. Okay. And we'll basically just copy this, paste it, and then we'll do faction 2, the FID of the second faction. I think description should come before, maybe. Yeah, I put description before parameters, so I'm going to keep that same convention. So we'll do description. This function will set the two specified factions as allies, and will also remove each other from enemies if for some reason they were. So, okay, cool. We got that, and it doesn't return anything, so we don't need to specify a return. So now we'll do function. Holy cow. Function scr faction form alliance faction 1. I should just copied and pasted, but whatever. Boom. There we go. So now what we're going to do is find our two. So we're going to have to work with arrays a little bit. So this is going to be ugly, but we're just going to get it working, and then we can refine it after. So the more I think about it, the more a array is probably not the way to go. I'm thinking that we probably want a map so that we can use the FID as the key. Because right now we would have to search through this. So let's tweak that. So let's go to, where's our data structures? Here we go. Data structures. So map. So DS map is a data structure that is an exceptionally useful one once you store key and value pairs. So our key is going to be the faction ID, which is our type, and then the value is going to be the struct of the stuff, like the description and all that stuff. So yeah, so what we will do is we will do DS map create. So let's go back to our thing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say DS map create. Okay, so global factions. So we have that saved. So now what we're going to do is, instead of returning a array, this will set the global.factions DS map to the default starting state. We'll say to a default state when a new game is started. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do, first we need to check if a DS map exists. We always want to do that because if for some reason it doesn't, our game will just crash, and that we don't want to. We want to make resilient code. So first we will verify that the DS map exists. So we'll do if DS map exists. It says ID and key, so that's interesting. Exists. If the specified key exists, okay. So we don't need to check if the DS map exists or not, I guess. Let me read this whole thing here, for example. It is recommended to use structs over DS maps as they have similar features. It's easier to use and are garbage collected automatically. Okay, so yeah, I'll just use a struct then. So we're just gonna return a struct of structs. Whew, we're doing good already, let me tell you. Okay, so we're gonna change this to a struct, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say faction dudes is going to be the key. It should let us do that. So what we can do is we can get rid of the FID, and then we can get rid of this, and then we can specify faction bros, unexpected syntax error. Oh, we still have this DS map exists. Let's get rid of that. See what it does. I don't think it lets us do that as a key though. Let's see. GMS2 use macro as struct key. Okay, I think that this should still work. So I'm just gonna roll with it. So we will do how we had it, scr init factions, and this is just going to be a struct of the actual factions that we have. So this will return a struct of faction structs meant to be called to set factions to a default state when the game is started, blah blah blah. All right, so then we can do, since we are returning something, we'll say return, I think it's just struct. So yeah, it's just struct. Okay. Return struct the factions struct. All right. So what we can do now that we have that figured out, and I think it should work, is we are going to set our, I cannot type today, our first faction to be allied. So what we can do here is determine if we are already allied. So what we can do is if global factions, and then I think it's accessed in this, actually no, it's going to be factions dot faction. This is not going to work, is it? We'll say factions dot faction 1. That's not going to work right. How do we, let's go back to our struct. How do we do a dynamic key on a struct? So we probably need an accessor, I think. Okay, so we just do a $. Is how we do that. So we can do factions, do a $sign with a space after, and then that will allow me to specify the dynamic key that we're passing in here. So if global factions dynamic key, so we're getting that, so we can reference that, which is going to be allied factions. So then we also want to, so allied factions is going to be an array. So we want to check and see if faction 1 is already included in that array. So, or faction 2 is already in that array. So what functions do we have for arrays? Array functions. Is there like an array find, maybe? All right. Going back to messiness here. So what we're going to do, let's just... I am not liking GameMaker, how it interacts with the different data types. This is such a pain. Like, I'm used to just working in Go and like JavaScript and just being able to just rapidly do this stuff with no problem, and this is just a nightmare. So, Jesus, this is so stupid. Get current faction 1 allied factions. So we're going to say var F1. I'm going to say AF1 for allied factions 1 equals, and I'm going to say global factions faction 1 allied factions. Okay, boom. So that should give us a array. Okay, then we're going to iterate through this array. I can't believe there's no like find. I don't want to use array get because if it doesn't exist, it's going to crash the game. This is dumb. Okay. Yeah, normally I would just do like array find, and if nothing was returned or something, then, you know, you would just skip past it. But I have to actually iterate through the array and examine every little thing and see if, you know, it equals whatever. And yeah, so iterate through this array and compare factions. So what we're going to do is for I equals 0. Probably have to specify var I equals 0. I is less than array length, and we're going to do AF1 and I plus plus. Actually, we're probably going to want to just do this straight, because there's a chance that we're copying like the current snapshotted value of what that allied factions array is into this variable called AF1. So we can't modify AF1 directly because it won't take effect to global factions at all. It just wouldn't do anything. And if we tried to modify global factions based on the array position, it could be different. And I don't want to have a potentially obscure bug there, so I think we should just suck it up and throw this in there and just get rid of this AF1 thing. Iterate through faction 1 array and compare factions. Is our faction already included? If we're going to do... I'm going to just copy this again. And since we're accessing an array, we can do I. Well, first we have to check if the array is even greater than... The length of the array is greater than 0, or else the game will crash. I hate this. Okay. Does faction 1 even have any... already have any allied factions? So what we can do is if array length, paste this in, equals 0. I guess I'll say greater than 0. And then what we can do is we can cut this and move this in here. Okay, iterate through faction 1 array and compare factions. Is our faction already included? Does faction 1 allied functions faction equal, and we'll just say faction 2. we have a match. So what we're gonna do here, I'm gonna create some flag variables. So these variables will be set by determining logic to ensure we don't have double entries. Okay, so we're going to do var add 1 equals true, var add 2 equals true. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we have a match, do nothing. So we're going to say add 1 equals false. Okay, so we're just already determining if they exist or not. So that's what we're doing there. So now we can copy this whole logic. Go here. This faction 2. Already have any allied factions? Factions 2, array length, faction 2, array length, faction 2 is equal faction 1. And we'll do add 2 equals false. So then what we'll do, I'll just say determine if we need to worry about duplicate entries. And I'll copy and paste that here. All right. And then so now that we've got that, you can get rid of this old stuff here. So now we've got that, we can update our factions. So now what we're going to do here is if add 1 is still true, then we are going to let's see, array. So we can push to an array. Now what that does is that just with this function you can push a value onto the end of an array without having to know the length of the array. Cool. So we'll do array push. Now the array that we're going to be pushing to is going to be this global factions, faction 1, allied factions. And then the value that we're going to be pushing is going to be faction 2. And then we're going to do basically the same thing except for flipped. Add 2. Faction 2 will add faction 1 to the allied list, right? Save. So now we've got that. We have faction form alliance done. Fantastic. Awesome. Sweet. All that happy stuff. So now we also need a function to, you know, remove alliance. So we'll just do another one. Let's see, we'll do function scr faction end alliance. And so what we'll do with this is we'll just do faction 1 and faction 2 again. Description. This function will set the 2 specified factions to no longer be allies, simply removing them from their. This function will remove the 2 factions from each other's allied list, effectively making them neutral. Okay. And then we've got param. We'll just copy this, right? No need to reinvent the wheel twice. So now we can do function scr. I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to wise up this time. Boom. So now what we're going to do is attempt to remove the remove faction 2 from faction 1's allied list. So what we're going to do is similar logic here. I'm going to copy this. This is such a ugly pain. So let's see if they are even included in the first place. So array length global factions is greater than 0. Iterate through faction 1, compare factions. So what we can do is this our desired faction? So then we have a match. Remove the faction. Now this could potentially be dangerous. So we're already preventing duplicates. So what I think that we can do is that in the middle of this function, this going through the array, we're potentially mutating the array in the middle of iterating through it, which could be dangerous and cause it to crash. So what I think we're going to do is that we're going to have to there's two ways that we can handle it. We can either just break out of the loop once we complete it and hope that GameMaker doesn't keep like going through it or whatnot, or we can just simply add another flag variable, and then we can, after we've iterated through and determined, you know, which one has the faction, then after we're done going through the array, then we can safely get rid of it while we're not iterating through it. I think option 2 sounds better to me because I'm not trusting GameMaker with how they handle their data stuff. This is obviously a huge pain to me, and I have little faith that they're doing stuff behind the scenes the way that I want them to, or the way that I would expect it to be done, or the way that I would hope it would be done. So I'm just gonna play it safe. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say C determines which index of the allied factions array to remove. So I'm going to say remove 1, or I'm going to say var remove 1, remove 2. Okay, so we're just going to declare them here, and then actually, you know what, I'm going to set them to be -1 so that we can check. Var remove 2, so that we can just double check that, like, hey, if they're still defaulted to -1, don't do anything because we weren't able to find anything. So we have a match. Remove so what we'll do is flag the index for removal. So we'll do remove 1 equals I. Okay. And then what we'll do is determine if faction 2 is included in faction 1's allied factions. You can get rid of this. Okay, so now we can pretty much just copy this and tweak it to be flipped. Faction 2, faction 2, faction 2, we're searching for faction 1. And then we'll remove 2 will be I. Okay. So now remove the specified indexes from the array. Okay. So if remove 1 doesn't equal -1, we're good to go. So then we can do array. I think pop is what we need. No, that's the last element of the array. Delete. With this function, you can delete a value from an array at any given position. So variable index, number of values to delete. Okay. So we'll do array delete, and the array that we're going to be deleting is this one here, allied factions, and then the index is going to be remove 1, and the number of values to be removed is just simply 1. We're only deleting the 1 value. This is so dumb. Remove 2, so we can change this to faction 2, and then remove 2. There. End alliance. All right, cool. So this is probably going to be a really long episode. This is already, how long have we been recording? We've already been going for an hour. Oh, this is going to be horrible to watch. Who's going to want to watch this crap? This is going to suck to edit, too. Whatever, start to finish. You know what? Maybe I'll just cram this all into one super big long video. That way people can just skip it and then not have to watch it. Stonks. I like that. All right. So next thing we need to do is need to be able to make factions enemies as well. How am I going to test all this stuff, first of all? Because I don't even know if this stuff is going to work. All right, well, now that I'm thinking about it, I should have probably started with the hostile enemy tracking first. Because I can test that and make sure that works. And then I could have just simply, you know, made my ships and assigned them to a certain faction, and then I could have added some debug code to, like, I don't know, I press F5 or like I press N or something like that, a random key, and then it just assigns a ship to a faction and see if they fight or not. I think I'm just so drained from work today. I think I'm just going to stop here because I think I'm just getting in a big rabbit hole here. I spent more time fighting with GameMaker than I did actually doing real logic, which is frustrating. I mean, this is like... I hate how this looks. Like, this looks like just terrible code to me, and I'm not sure how to clean it up to safely do what I want. Because I have to keep, like, adding all these safeguards so that GameMaker doesn't crash and just vomit out a bunch of debug stuff when people are playing the damn game. So, yeah, that's fun. Well, you know what? Let's just stop sulking, and then let's make some magic happen. So let's do a new script. Script SCR hostile tracking. We'll do hostile tracking control. We'll say maybe enemy tracking, maybe combat tracking. I don't know what. I'm just gonna name it enemy tracking control. Okay, we're gonna settle on a name and go with it. So let's see what we're gonna need for that. Let me close this ugly faction script that just ruins my day. I'm gonna close this too while I'm at it. Scroll back up here. And then I'm going to open it again. There we go. Look at that magic. So, keep a list of hostile ships in the system. Add or remove ships from that list as they engage or are destroyed. So here's the thing, is that every ship is going to be tracking this separately. So this is not going to be on the controller. This is going to be on the ship. If I make functions that pass in a array, it's going to copy that array into that function, and then any mutations or modifications I make to that array are just going to be that local array that was copied in. It's not going to affect the original array. It's working in the faction code because I'm referencing a global array. So I think we just do what we did before with like weapons and stuff. We just make sure that this variable exists, and then we make it happen. So let's do tracking hostile ships. So we will say enemy, I'll just make a variable called enemies, and we will make an array. And I will copy this, obj test enemy. You know, while we're at it, oh, this is so messy. There's so many things I want to do at the same time, and I can't keep this all bite-sized to be digestible viewing content. I want to implement the faction system. I want to implement the enemy tracking. I want to get rid of player ship and test enemy ship and just have one single ship. And that's it. That's all I want to do. But there's so many little steps to do in between that. Tell you what, let's consolidate these ships. Let's do object. I'm going to create, and I'm going to create an object. Where are you? I'm going to say obj ship. All right. So create event. Let's save. Let's close all but this. Let's pop up on my object ship. That way I'm not doing a bunch of stuff going back and forth. So, copy all of this stuff, and I'm going to put this in the create event. Boom. Cool. So now we have this stuff, but some of this stuff is only usable if we are the player. And I don't really want to do all this stuff every time we create a ship. So what I think we'll do is when we do our init ship script, I can just add a optional argument that says player equals false. And then what we're going to do is that let me update the JS docs stuff real quick. Param. This will be a boolean, true or false. This will be player optional parameter that determines if this ship should be player controlled or not. So now what we can do down here, this is after the switch and stuff. Maybe we can do this first. So assign the sprite, player only stuff. So we can say if player, because it's a boolean, we can just say that, because if it's true, then it'll execute everything in this block. So then we can do all of our code here. Yes, so we will cut this out and move this here. There we go. So since GameMaker is super lenient, I don't have to even have these specified yet. It'll just make them for me if they don't already exist, which is nice, thankfully. And then, oh, let's get rid of this and move this to OBJ controller. How about that? Where is my OBJ controller? There we go. Okay. There we go. So now I'll change this to do. Should we have different cursors for different rooms? I'll save that for now. So Since object controller is the first thing that's being created, we're setting this. We're setting the cursor stuff. That's no longer a ship thing. So cool. We did that. Save. Let me close controller. Awesome. So keep track of our previous XY coordinates. All that stuff is good. I think maybe we can move this debug stuff to controller as well. I might just... I don't want to mess with that now. I just want to get the meat of what we're doing done. So I'm going to put a to-do here. Move this to controller. All right, cool. So we've got that stuff there. That's fun. So we have the create event done. Cool. Let's go to the step event. I'll copy all of this with Control A, add event, step. Boom. Okay. So let's see. And what I might do is I might just create a variable called player. And this will also be set by the init ship as well. I'll just rename this is player. So we'll just say is player. Player equal true. Because we had a naming conflict there. So let's change this here as well. Is player. Okay. So now what we can do in the step event, previous XY. So a lot of this stuff, we're going to have, so all this shield stuff, that stuff we need to do whether it's a player or not. So player specific stuff, if player, then what we can do is we're going to move all of this, like this movement and stuff into the player specific stuff. So if player, then we're going to do the, you know, the keyboard movement with WASD, and you know, speed stuff should be fine. We want to do that after we determine our movement, so that's perfectly fine. And then of course debug stuff is also going to be only player. All right. I have a to-do here, determine how best to handle player death. So what I'll just do is I'll just do if not player instance destroy. So there we go. So there's that. Now let's go to our OBJ test enemy. I'm going to get rid of this init ship and then pop open test enemy here. So what do we have in the step event for them? Okay, so then we have the AI stuff, which is a lot of stuff. And then we have the speed, and then make sure all that stuff is good. Okay, so we also have some variables that they have. So AI variables. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to our create event. Actually, no, we're going to go to our init ship again. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, if is player, we're going to do an else here. And we're going to specify non-player stuff. So we're going to specify our AI variables like our attack range, fire primary, secondary. That way we have access to that. Let's save that. So that stuff should be good. Everything else should be the same. So for this script stuff, I think I'm going to make another script. Create script. A CR. AI control. I'll just make that capital. AI control. Okay. Let's go back up to all of our AI stuff here. So AI state stuff. I'm going to copy this and move this into here. Why did everything go small all of a sudden? It looks super weird. What happened? Okay, I think I just had... There we go. Now it's looking back to normal. So let's go back up here. Holy cow. Indent all of this stuff. To do, finish JS doc stuff, whatever. All right, so we just moved all that stuff to a script, and it should still work. So what we can do is on obj ship during the step. So we have if player, so we're also going to add a else here. Else, and we're going to say non-player stuff, and we'll just do SCI AI control, because that's what a lot of that stuff was. So cool. Done there. Now what's next? So the draw event, we got a lot of stuff here. Copy. We're going to go here to object ship. We're going to add a draw event. Paste it all in. So this is all stuff that needs to be done regardless of if we're player or not. And then this will be if testing mode, if player and testing mode, player specific stuff. Save that. So the draw event looks good. Let me just double check test enemy draw event. Yeah, we're doing the same thing there. That's fine. So now we have the end step event for the player ship. So let's copy all of this, add event, step, end step. Okay, so what we're going to do is if player and else. So this is all going to be get firing input. And that'll be there. So let's go back down to our test enemy. And all they are going to do is just run this. Cool. And then all of this stuff is also player specific stuff. I wish it would just... Okay, what we're going to do is paste, paste. Player specific stuff, and then we're going to put non-player stuff. Save. Okay, I think we have a ship that should work regardless of if it is a player controlled ship or an NPC. So I'm going to comment out the SCR init ship. And then I'm going to close obj test enemy. I'm going to close obj player ship. And I'm just going to pop open obj controller. And what we're going to do is I'm going to say to do handle this for realsies when the time comes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say obj, let's see, we're going to do instance create layer. Let's figure out where we're going to create it. So how big is our room? 2048 by 2048. Okay, so let's go to the instances layer here. We're going to delete all these ships. Don't need them. Okay. And let's just create it, you know, semi close by. We'll do... So we have object controller in the room still, so that's good. Why does this room inspector suck now? Yeah, object controller's still there. So cool. Close that. Instances, create layer. We'll just do 1024. 1024 to be the center of the room. The layer ID or name is going to be instances. The object we're going to create is going to be obj ship. And it has a bunch of other variables. So let's do, I'm going to do var p equals instance create layer, create player ship. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, with p, we're going to run init ship, and we're going to say spr gen ship. I'm going to do gen ship 6 because why not? And then is player, I'm going to say true. Okay, so now we're going to create an enemy or two. So I'm going to say var e1 for enemy, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I shouldn't have copied the var p, but whatever. Equals instance create layer. I'm going to do, we want them kind of like a little bit of a way, so I'll just do like plus 700. And then we'll do obj ship, and we'll just copy this, and we'll say with E1, and we will give these guys like, I don't know, ship 2, and we'll just omit that other variable because we don't need it because they're not a player. And I will just copy this, E2, and we will do minus 700. And we'll give this guy like ship 1. Why not? Save. All right. So what I suspect is going to happen when I go to run the game is nothing's going to happen. Like the ships will appear, but they just won't do anything. So let's hit play. There we go. So we have ships, but I can't shoot them because we don't have the faction system. But we have one single object for both player ship and enemy ship. So that's cool. I like that. So yeah, cool. Anyway, so cool. We've factored out OBJ player ship and OBJ test enemy. We've combined them into one ship. So now we're not having to duplicate code all the time. Small victory. So now we can, now that we've got that staged, now we can work on let's see, let's get rid of this for now. I'm just going to close all but OBJ ship. And what I'm going to do, so we're already tracking enemies. So we are, at least we have a array. So now what we're going to do is, where's my enemy tracking control script? Okay. So now what we want to do is we're going to want to do a few different things here. So I'm just going to make this function here. I'm going to say add enemy to list to array. Actually, I don't think we need like a function or anything for this. We probably need a function to remove an enemy from an array. Tell you what, let's make the function anyway, because we can also ensure that we're not doing duplicates. So add enemy to array. So is the enemy already in our list? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just say, enemy ID, which will be the instance ID of the enemy to track. We'll probably be doing a lot of stuff. We'll do if array length enemies is greater than 0. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to say, do we have any enemies yet? And then I'll paste this. I'll say we do. Is the enemy already in our list? And then what we can do is for var I equals 0, I less than array length and enemies, I plus plus. There we go. We do iterate through our enemies. Is this enemy, you know, we'll just put it back to how it was. No, just damn it. Okay. So, try to find an enemy ID match if, and we could say enemies I equals enemy ID. We already have a match, do nothing, and we can just return. And then so since we're returning there, what we can do is, if we haven't returned yet, we should be clear to add the enemy ID. So what we can do is we can do array push. Let me scroll down so I can see. Array is going to be enemies. And the value to push is enemy ID. There. Stonks. We did a thing. Cool. Function scr add enemy to array. And we also need a function scr delete enemy from array. Enemy ID. And we'll just do the same thing here. Well, we're going to need to iterate through and find the index of where it is anyway. So, yeah. So we'll copy a lot of this stuff. Do we even have any enemies yet? Do we even have any enemies? We do. Is the enemy in our list? So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to say var enemy index equals -1. And what we can do is we can just say found it, update index, and break out of loop. Enemy index equals I. And then we'll do a break. Is the ID in our list? We do. Iterate through our enemy list, enemy array. And then we're going to delete the enemy ID from the array if possible. So if enemy index does not equal -1, that means we found something, which means we should be clear to do array delete. And the array is going to be enemies, index is going to be enemy index, and the number of values to delete is 1. There we go. These are such a pain to do, but that's programming for you. So awesome. So we have the ability to add enemies to the array and delete enemies from the array. So we need to be able to like select a enemy. So when I mouse over and like click them, Like, they should be selected. Also, I kind of want these enemies to be like... So, like, if I'm adding somebody to my enemy list, I think they should also be added... I think I should also be added to their enemy list, because now we're fighting. So maybe I should also tweak these to do that for the other enemy as well. Let's see. You know what? We could easily do this, probably. Yeah, let's do another function. Function scr. We'll say add enemy. Okay, and what this is going to do is this is going to take an enemy ID, and it's going to do pretty much the same thing that we do here. We're going to do update our enemy list, and we're going to say if instance, let's see, let's first of all, does our instance even exist? So we'll say if instance, I'll say doesn't exist, instance exists, we'll say enemy ID, because we're passing in their object ID. They don't even exist. Just return and do nothing. Return. Cool. So now they do exist. Add them to our list. So then we can do scr add enemy to array, and we can just do enemy ID, and then also add them, add us to the enemies list. So we can say scr. We could do with enemy ID, and we can say scr add enemy to array, and for the enemy for the ID that we're going to use there, we're going to do other.id, because when you're using the with, the other specifies, like me, the calling instance. So stonks, there we go. And then we'll also do something similar for function delete enemy. So does our instance even exist? They do exist. So we want to delete enemy from array. Delete enemy from array, and then delete enemy from array. I think maybe I should tweak this. So we should, for the deletion, we should at least remove them from our list no matter what. Remove them from our list. And then does our enemy instance even exist? Remove us from the enemy's list. They do exist. Also remove us from the enemy's list. There we go. So cool. That should work fine. But the problem is that when I left click, I shoot. So I think if I left click and I'm mousing over a enemy, it should just add them to the list. I think that's how that should work. So in my obj ship step event, let's also add something here to click targeting, right? Maybe I might add something like tab targeting later. To do, maybe this should be tab targeting, to where maybe like you just tab and it like selects the person that's like right in front of you nearest. That could be cool to add, but I think you should also be able to like click too, but we'll figure it out. So if mouse button, if mouse check button, I'm going to do released in case you change your mind. You can click and drag off and then release, and then it won't target them. So if mouse check button released, I'm going to say MB left. What we can do is if place meeting mouse X, mouse Y, and we'll do obj ship. And what we can do there is we can say ensure that we're not clicking ourselves. Is there, let's see, we'll say, are we clicking on a ship? Is the ship different than us? Is the ship, so we'll just put ensure we can't target ourselves. That would be dumb. So we'll say if, well, does place meeting return something? It returns a Boolean, true or false. Should you need to get the unique instance ID of the object being collided with, you should use instance place. Okay. Instead of saying like place meeting, maybe we can do instance place. Let's do that. Let's do instance place. Okay. Instance place, mouse X, mouse Y, obj ship. And we can say, since it's going to be returning a ID, we can say doesn't equal no one, which is, I believe, what is returned. Instance ID or no one. So cool. So if it doesn't equal no one, tell you what, let's do var, we'll do SID for ship ID maybe, or let's do ship ID equal instance place. And what we can do is ship ID equals or doesn't equal no one. Ensure we can't target ourselves. We'll say if ship ID doesn't equal our own ID, let's say add them to enemy list. So what we'll do is we'll do SCR add enemy, and we will do ship ID. Bam. Getting closer. So now we have it adding to our enemy, which is fantastic. We're adding it to our list of enemies, and it's also adding us to their enemy list, which should be good. Now we need to also adjust the AI so that we're checking for enemies. So let's go to SCR AI control, and what we're going to do is we can't do instance nearest, so we can't do like obj good guys anymore. So let's we don't have a target. Do we have any enemies? We'll say, do we have any enemies? And what we can do just for testing is we can set our target to be the very first enemy, just for testing. So we'll put to do. This code might have to scan through and find the nearest enemy. Actually, you know what? I might make that a function. So we have enemy tracking. So let's do SCR find nearest enemy. And what we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to take no arguments because it's just going to use the enemy list. Oh, we got to do function. Sorry. Function SCR find nearest enemy. And what this is going to do is that this is going to it's going to iterate through all the enemies. So let's sort of copy this. We'll say var closest enemy equals no one. And do we even have any enemies? Array length, we do. Iterate through our enemy array. So then what we're going to need to do is calculate, let's see, var closest enemy, we'll say var closest, var smallest distance. And I'm going to say -1 for now, just to start it. So calculate the distance. Let's see. Does this enemy still exist? So we'll do if instance exists, and we'll do enemies I. It does. Calculate the distance to this enemy. So what we'll do is we're going to say var dist equals, we'll say distance to object, and we'll say enemies I. And what we will do is we will say, you know, I'm just going to set this to just be something like, we'll say 90,000 should be a long way away. So what we can do is it the closest enemy we've found so far? So we can say if dist is less than smallest distance, we could say it is. Update variables. So we can say smallest distance equals dist. We want to update that. And then also closest enemy equals enemies I. There we go. So now it's iterating through. And what we want to do is we should have calculated the closest enemy, return it if possible. So now what we're going to do is if closest enemy does not equal no one. Actually, you know what? We can just return closest enemy, because if it's no one or not. So we'll just return closest enemy. There we go. Boom. So now we've got that. So in AI control, we can say, let's see, do we try to find nearest enemy? So what we can do here is we can say target equals, and we can just say scr nearest, where is it? Find nearest enemy. Find nearest enemy. Okay. So there we go. So we have that. So our code is tracking. If we tried to update the target, so this can return no one if we don't have anything. So that's fine. So I think this should work now. So if we save this and I run it, it's probably going to crash somehow, but so if I click on this guy, there we go. So now he's mad at me, and now he's going to start shooting me and stuff. But our projectile code doesn't work yet. So what we can do is, let's see, OBJ projectile. So we have this collision with OBJ good guys and OBJ bad guys. Let's do a collision with OBJ ship. And what we're going to do is we're just going to copy basically just this. Copy, paste. So let's see. What we need to do, however, though, we need to, we want to be able to hit, like, you know, all of the enemies. Because if we're in a big firefight, you know, we want to be able to hit all of them. So what we need to do is, well, let's make a script to determine function scr determine if collision is with enemy, colliding ID. We'll take that in for an argument. So now what we can do here is just sort of similar stuff. We're just going to be iterating through the array of enemies. So let's just copy this. I did the thing again. There we go. There we go. So let's just paste this here. Do we even have any enemies? We do. Is the enemy already in our... Is the colliding ID in our list? Try to find a match. So if enemies I equals colliding ID, there we go. We have a match. Return true. So we'll say return true. And we'll put down here, did not find a match. Return false. Return false. Save. So now we can go down here into our stop it. Into this code here. And what we can do is if we can say scr determine if collision is with enemy. And what we can do is we can say other.id determine if this is a ship we should be hitting. Save. So now I'm going to go up here just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to slow down. So if I click this guy, nope, there we go. We messed up. So determine if collision is with enemy. Variable projectile enemies is not set before reading it. Oh, I gotcha. So what we probably have to do is when we create our projectile. So if we go to scr update this and all that stuff, we're going to change this to enemies. And this is going to be an array. Enemies. Yeah. So what we can do here is scr fire weapon. Enemies. Enemies. And then this we will change to be an array. Enemies. With an enemy. Okay. We're ready to shoot. Projectile enemies equals enemies. Okay, so we're basically passing like our list of enemies. We're passing it to our script, which is passing it to another script that fires the projectile, and it's passing it to the projectile. That way the projectile has access to that. It's probably not the most efficient way of doing it, but I'm not sure how best to handle that. So we'll do that how it is. So projectile enemies equals enemies, and then for my OBJ projectile in my create event, I will say enemies. Enemies equals empty array. So now I think if I run it, maybe it should work. I hope. So our projectile's still not hitting though. So that tells me that we have some stuff to do. So let's get rid of these. We're going to delete OBJ bad guys event, and we're going to delete the OBJ good guys event. So now we're colliding with object ship. But I think what's happening is in my ship code, where's my ship? OBJ ship. we need to actually pass in enemies instead of a... there we go. Save. Now it should work. So I'm just going to click on this guy. I'm going to click on this guy. There we go. So it's working. I can hit them, but they can't hit me. Okay. Yeah, but they're not able to hit me for some reason. Why? Oh, because I only did this for players. So if player, and then down here for non-player stuff. There we go. So now they should be able to hit me. There we go. So then now I'm hitting them. They are hitting me. We're a big happy family. Punk. Alright, so now the other test. Let me scoot back over here to this guy. So if I click him and then drag off, he should not be added to enemy list, and I shouldn't be able to attack him. But if I let go, he's now my enemy, and we are duking it out. This guy's just getting lit up, man. Cool. That works. That works pretty darn well. So now what we can probably do is, let's go back to my controller. And in my create event here, let's create a bunch of enemies of other ships. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to do for var I equals 0. I is less than, we'll just say 50. We're going to create about 50 or so ships. And then I plus plus. So what we're going to do here is we're going to randomize location. So what we're going to say is var xx equals I random range, and we'll say 0. And we'll do room width. Okay, and then var yy equals I random range 0 room height. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to say var e equals, and we're going to do this, and we're just going to replace these with xx, yy, and there you go. Oh, and width, e, and we will do scr init ship. And let's go back to our test enemy here, because I think we had, yeah, we had like a bunch of we had a choose thing going on here, which is pretty cool. So what we'll do is we'll just pass in choose, and let's also add in spr gen ship. I haven't done ship 5 yet. We'll make ship 6. So then let's take these and get rid of these. Save. So now if we run our game, this might take a second to spawn 50 ships. So holy cow, we have a lot of ships. So I'm just going to start clicking a bunch of these guys. And this is like a performance test just to see how bad this is. Suckers, you know you want a piece of me. Oh my god, man. So clicking on them. I'm not able to hurt people that we're not targeting, but if I just click on them, I can target them. And they are lighting me up, man. Look at them. That's so many projectiles. Oh my god, look, there's still more guys. Hey, we haven't pissed these guys off yet. Come on. There we go, come get it. Oh yeah, man. That's so many ships. And the game's handling it pretty well. Like, there's not even a point in, like, shooting this wall of ships. This is insane. I've pissed off everybody. Oh, there. Now their turrets are actually aiming. See all the bullets flying to my cursor? This is ridiculous. Oh, man. I'm just getting lit up. This is great. Let's head back to, oh no, I'm being shot at. Oh, my shields are recharging. Oh no, now they're back again. I'm sorry! I didn't mean to shoot at everybody, okay? Just chill, bro. Oh yeah, they're lighting me up. Okay, well we got something working. So now I think we can do a test to see if, just for funsies, let's do E. You know, I'm gonna say faction equals. I'm gonna say faction dudes. Okay, so now that we've got the targeting system and stuff working, let's go to OBJ ship again. I got too much stuff open now. OBJ ship. I'm gonna say faction equals faction none, just to, you know, which faction do we belong to. What we're gonna do now is let's close everything but this, and we'll go to faction control, where we were doing this stuff earlier. So faction dudes, so form alliance, update factions, and alliance. Okay. So here's what I think that we should probably also do. I think our enemy tracking control, I think if we shoot a member of a faction, they should all start coming for us. So I'm kind of scared. But if we go to add enemy, you know, that enemy has a certain faction, and I think everybody, holy crap. Okay. So let's do, we also want to take factions into consideration. Homie's gonna beat down some fools. So here's what I need to do for this. If I'm adding an enemy and that the enemy is a member of a faction, then that means I should also be added to all those enemies' lists, which is gonna be fun. Now this is where this could really bog down the game, because I'm iterating through the array every time I want to add an enemy. We'll just see what happens. So how do we get all instances of an object? GMS2 get all instances of an object. I guess we don't have to. I guess we can say if, or like with obj ship. To do this could be really inefficient. So I can say with obj ship, which is going to be all other ships, is this ship part of the enemy faction. So we'll say if faction equals, and since we're in a with, we'll do other enemy ID dot faction. That might not work. What we might have to do is move this into this with statement, so we have like a with within a with, which could get really messy. That could be a problem. What we can do is that we can just like update our enemy list. I don't know how to do this though. So I could just do like with obj ship, but then I have no way of getting this ID because I don't have a good way of accessing that. So what I could probably do is make another function. Function scr add entire faction to enemy. So we need to specify the faction, and that won't work either, will it? Target ID, I guess. Maybe we can get this to work. I'm trying to run out of steam here. SCR add entire faction to enemies list. So what we can do is, well, no, that won't work either because we don't have access to that. No. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to just stop it there for now. Like, you know, we've got all these ships here. I can click on them and make them enemies, and they'll start targeting me. And it still runs pretty smooth. And I can't shoot anybody who I haven't targeted. Okay. So I know we've been running a while, but there's one last thing that I want to do. I want to like play a sound when like someone targets us, or like whenever we start combat with somebody. Like in Escape Velocity Nova, it played like this whoop. It played like this sound. So let's see if I can find it. Like Escape Velocity Nova target sound. Sounds. Those are all weapons explosions. Alert plays when a hostile ship appears. Yeah, that's the one. I don't know if I want it to play like that, but like something like that. So when I get targeted, like, oh no, we have a problem. So yeah, your ship is exploding. Man, these sounds bring me back, man. Let's see, light blaster. I think my sound effects are a lot better. I don't want to brag. I mean, granted, these were made in like what, the 90s? I don't care. I'm still better. But yeah, I want something like that. So when we get targeted, we know. So I think that would be really cool. But I don't think I'm going to do that tonight. There's still... I got something working, but it's extremely rough. I'm going to just do it one more time. So we got all these ships, right? And I can shoot, and nobody gets hit until I specifically click on one. But if I click on them all, then it's game time. Well, come on. Everybody wants a piece of me. There we go. Come get it. I'm just getting obliterated here, but it's fine. So I'm on a quest to handle every ship in the galaxy. There we go. Very nice. Did I get everybody? Oh no, there's still someone there. Alright, let me swing up here a little bit and see if I can snag some more people. There we go. Look at some more guys over here too. Yeah, there we are. What's up, amigos? Wanna come join my train of pain? Let's see, do we have any other ships around here? I think I might have got it. Let's blow up some of these little small ships. There you go. Stupid little ships. Ah. Woof. All right. There we go. We got some stuff. So let's close all but this, and let's go back to my OBJ controller and make some notes before I forget. So we have we consolidated player and enemy and stuff like that, and so we have factions working. We have hostile enemy tracking working, but we can finish factions. So UI design logic, all that stuff. I don't know if I even ended up using the other states, like the enemy, neutral, or allied. Like, I don't know if I even used those types. So let's go to code cleanup. So I moved the AI logic to a script so I can get rid of that. What I can do is I can do SCR, let's see, enemy tracking control needs JS doc comments. I can do SCR faction control needs JS doc comments. Then we can do SCR AI control needs JS doc comments, and possible and these comments. So then we can also do finish ship AI, not API, AI. I type API too many times today. There we go. Cool. So those will be the next two things on the list, is to finish factions and finish AI. I got a good start on them. I mean, we've got it to where, you know, targeting ships works. That's fantastic. I think it would be cool to perhaps have a like a list of maybe enemy ships that you could see, like, who's attacking you, and maybe you could tab through them. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with what we got so far. I like it. Anyway, I'm gonna call it, because I've been streaming, or not streaming, but recording for 2 hours, 37 minutes, 32 seconds. This is going to be awful to edit, and it's going to be awful to view. But as always, I will condense it down so that you can see what I was able to accomplish. So you don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I apologize for this debacle, but this series is start to finish, including all the mental floundering of me trying to logic my way through this. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.